Good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday Mull for Tuesday, the 12th of January. Today, following McShane's reading, I was reading Genesis chapter 13, story of Abraham. He'd been called by God and had followed him. He'd gone into Egypt because there's a famine, and he now comes out of Egypt. And we're told in verse 3, from the Negev he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. And so Abram recognizes that God is with him. He had built an altar, and wherever he is, he worships God. The story continues that he and Lot, his nephew, then separate because they are too wealthy. They have too many possessions. The land can't support both of their flocks. And so Lot goes down into the valley, to the plains where there's cities and more people. Abram goes into Canaan, the hills round about. And God meets him there and says to him, look around, everything you see, I will give as a land to your descendants. Your descendants will own this. Your descendants will be blessed because of you. The world will be blessed because of you, and your descendants are going to be more numerous than the grains of the sand, more numerous than the dust of the earth, it says. Now, Abraham believes God. He doesn't own anything. He has no land himself. He doesn't see this blessing other than his possessions, and he has no children. But he takes God at his word, and we need to do that as well. Believe what God tells us. And then in verse 16, so Abraham went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. And Abraham was different to the people of his day. At that point, most people thought gods were locality bound. And so you'd have a god of a city. And if you went from one city to another, you'd worship the god of the new city, not the god of the old city. And the gods of the hills and the mountains and the valleys and the rivers, depending on where you were, there were different gods. Abraham recognized that that was not so. He had been called by God when he was living in Haran, and he followed that God into the land of Canaan, and that God was with him everywhere. And no matter where Abram was, he worshipped that God there. He built altars and called on the name of the God there. And we need to be like Abram. We need to recognize that no matter where we are, God is there. And sometimes we're tempted to think, oh, God was more present in my life 5 years ago when those good things were happening to me. Maybe now I've lost this and this has changed, and I've moved on to a different place, and we've got this COVID lockdown, and I don't sense God's presence like I did then. What we sense doesn't really matter because God is still there. And we can build our altars and call on the name of the Lord no matter where we are. So be encouraged to know that that is true, that we hear God and we take God at his word, because his word is true. And we might not feel it, we might not see it, in the same way that Abraham didn't see. God says, all this land will belong to your descendants. None of it belonged to him. But he took God at his word, and he trusted that God would do what he said. And indeed, God did what he said. And it's the same God we worship today who does what he says. And so as we go through life, God is with us in the good times and the bad. God is with us where we are now. And that is the source of our hope, and it's a source of blessing. Know that and be encouraged.